Good morning. In the Mishna Brura study for today, we're in chapter 25, halfway through number 11. So the Ramah says, Yesh mi shekatav, there is one who writes, lehaniach, to put on shel yad, your tefillin of your hand, meyushav, sitting, from the word yoshev, v'shel rosh me'umad, and your head tefillin, standing, from the word omeid. However, he says, uva medinot elu, in these countries, in other words, the land of Ashkenaz, the Ashkenazi lands, lo nahagu kain, they do not behave in this way, they do not have this custom, minhag, ella, rather, very important and common word, rather, shtehen, both of them me'umad, standing up. We put both our head tefillin and our hand tefillin on whilst we stand. The Mishnah Brura says on that, shtehen me'umad, both of them standing. Ayin b'magen Avraham, look from the word ayin, eye, look in the magen Avraham. Sherotzeh lehachriya, who wants to decide. Lachriya really means to rule amongst if you've got all the different opinions, so you want to say what the bottom line is. That's lehachriya. He wants to decide, tehanacha shel yad tihiyeh miyushav, putting on the hand tefillin should be sitting down. Ve'abracha tihiyeh be'amidah, and the blessing will be when you're standing up. So you say the bracha standing up, and then you sit down and you put on sitting down. Aval ba'Elia Rabbah, and the Elia Rabbah, one of the other great later halachic authorities, B'Shem Rashal, said in the name of the Maharshal. All of these rabbis are about the 1700s. B'Tshuva Siman et Tzadichet gives the reference. Katav, he wrote, Demi lanu gadol, who, me, right, de, me, that, who is, lanu, for us, gadol, greater, may Rabbeinu Shimshon mikinon, from Rabbeinu Shimshon of Kinon. I don't actually know who that is, but I'll see if I can find out. Achar shelamad Kabbalah, after he learnt Kabbalah, hayamit palel ketinok ben yumo, he would daven like a child, ben yumo, 1 day old. In other words, this was a person who had the depth of wisdom of the Kabbalah and still the simplicity to daven before Hashem like a child. So we're talking about somebody who's extremely great in his wisdom and in his service of Hashem. Demi shelo yachol lahasig soda, that someone who is not able to achieve or understand soda, its secret, al nachon, correctly, nachon is correct, yavo lekatzeitz benetiyot, will come, lekatzeitz benetiyot literally means to chop the plants, but what that means is, or the plantings, what it really means is somebody who will come to misunderstand the teachings, will come to the wrong thing. So somebody, this is a Kabbalistic idea of saying the bracha standing and the tefillin sitting, and he said, no, you Rabbi Shimshon McKinnon said this is going to lead you to the wrong kinds of conclusions. Al-Kain, therefore, yiyeh ha-bracha ve'anacha be'amidah, both the bracha and putting on the tefillin should be standing up. Uvaveru hagra, and in the writings of the Gaon of Vilna, Hochiach, he proved, degam lefi ha-zohar, that even according, or also according to the Zohar, the main work of Kabbalah, mutar, it is permissible, lehaniach ha-tefillin, to put on your tefillin shel yad ba'amidah, your hand tefillin when you are standing. So although there's this Kabbalistic idea to put your tefillin on sitting, both from a practical perspective that the Kabbalah will lead you astray, and from a Kabbalistic perspective it's okay to put it on standing up, al-kain ein lazuz, therefore you should not move mehaminag, from this custom. Fine. Now the Mishnah Brura takes a deeper foray into the whole concept of the role of Kabbalah in halacha. Katav ha-Knesset ha-Gedolah, the Knesset ha-Gedolah, one of the great authorities of the 1600s, wrote, Bichlale ha-Poskim, with general rules of halachic decisions. Kol davar sheba'alei ha-Kabbalah ve'ha-Zohar cholkim im ha-Gemara ve'ha-Poskim. Any matter in which the masters of Kabbalah and the Zohar are cholkim, argue with the Gemara and the Poskim. In other words, when the hidden Torah of the Kabbalah and the revealed Torah of the Gemara and Halacha argue, Haleich achar ha-Gemara, go after the Gemara ve'ha-Poskim, after the revealed Torah. Mihu, however, in Baalei Kabbalah machmirin, if the masters of Kabbalah are strict, machmir chumra, in other words, the Zohar, the Gemara says something's okay, but the Zohar says not so good, yesh lahachmir gamkein, you should also be strict. V'im lo huzkar b'gemara v'poskim. Now, what if it isn't mentioned? The Gemara doesn't say anything about it. Af al pi shenizkar b'Kabbalah, even though it is mentioned in the Kabbalah, ein anu yecholin lichof linhog kain. We cannot force anyone to behave in this way. In other words, related to the idea we spoke about in the past, where you have the hierarchy of mitzvah, derabanan, minhag, nice thing. When it comes to something in the Kabbalah, you can't say you have to do it. The most you can ever say is it's a good thing to do. V'din she'enu muzkar b'hipuch b'shas u'b'poskim, and a law that is not mentioned in Shas, that means the Gemara, and the halachic authorities to do the opposite. In other words, if it doesn't say you shouldn't do it, yesh leilech achar divra Kabbalah. You should follow the Kabbalah. It's a good thing to follow the Kabbalah. But again, it's not required. And also in a case where there is an argument, cholkin and plukta, it's the same word, one's in Hebrew, one's in Aramaic, beina poskim, between the halachic authorities, divra ha-Kabbalah, yachriya, the words of the Kabbalah will decide, will have the ruling voice. In other words, some halachic authorities say to do X, other halachic authorities say to do Y. The Kabbalah tells us to do Y, so that's what we will do. So the role of Kabbalah over here is not to overrule the Gemara. It never does that. But what it can do is fill in things that the Gemara doesn't speak about, or give the final word in matters that the Gemara is divided, that the sages, the halachic authorities are divided in. Back to Shulchan Aruch number 12. The Mechaber says, Im maniach tefillin kama pamim b'yom. If you put on tefillin several times throughout the day, for whatever reason, we'll maybe go into the reasons another time, but you put on tefillin once in the morning, once in the afternoon, tzarich levarech aleim b'chol pan. You would need to bless upon them. In other words, to say the brachot every time. Every time that you put on tefillin, you say a new bracha. Not that you say the blessing once for the whole day. It's every time you put them on. Nishmetu bimkomam. If they moved from their place, shamat means like to escape. Nishmetu, they moved from their place. Umamashmesh bahem, and you touch them, move them, to return them, lahachziran limkomam, to return them to their place. Sarich levarech, you will need to say the blessing again. The reason for that, we'll see in a second, is because by the tefillin moving out of their place, you've essentially taken them off. By moving them back into their place, you're putting them on again. Vim machzir achat mehem, if you would return one of the tefillin, in other words, let's say your arm tefillin stays in place, but your head tefillin have shifted out, and you're going to put those back, yevarech, you will say the bracha, kamoshe meniach tefillah achat, like you are only putting on one tefillah. What's one tefillah? Tefillah is the singular of tefillin. So we talk about the head tefillin and the arm tefillin. Really, it should be the head tefillah and the arm tefillah. Both of them together are tefillin. Keda lakaman, like later. Lakaman is later. So like later. Siman Chavav, chapter 26. We'll see more on that then. Hezizam, if you moved them, mimkomam, from their place, adaita, another Aramaic word, da'at, understanding, adaita, with the understanding, lehachaziram miyad, to put them back, to return them immediately. Tzarich levarech, he's still going to need to make the bracha again. The Ramah says, v'yesh omrim shelo levarech. Some say we should not say the bracha again when they've moved out of place. We'll see more details on that in a second. V'hachi nahug, and hachi, this, and this is nahug, this is the minhag, this is how we behave. Ungfani parallel, Siman Chet, Tala, and I've already explained it above. That's it in the Shulchan Aruch for today. Let's go further in the Mishnah Brura. So the Mishnah Brura says, B'chol pa'am, every time that the tefillin move, that you put on tefillin, you'll say the bracha. Afilu im keshesilkan hayadato lachziran techet. Even if keshesilkan, when you removed them, another Aramaic word, salak means to remove. Even when you removed them, hayadato, his intention, his understanding was lachziram techet, to put them back immediately. So in other words, I took off my tefillin, and then I'm going to put them right back on again. Ve'afilu im lo shana makomo klal, and even if I did not change my place at all, bain time in the meantime, I didn't walk into another room and back. I stood in my place, took off the tefillin, went to put the tefillin back on. Rabbi Yosef Karo says, you say a new bracha. And as we saw, the Ramah soon argues. He says, no, he's not so enthusiastic about the second bracha. And if at the time of the bracha, your intention was that afterwards you would take off the tefillin, and then you would go and put them on again, we see clearly from the words of the Magen Avraham above, Besiman Chet Sif Katan Tedva, he gives the reference, the Kulei Alma, Kulei Kol, all, Alma, the world, the whole world, in other words, everyone agrees, Kulei Alma, everyone agrees, Ein Tzarich Lechsov Levaret, you will not need to go back and say the bracha. What's he saying? The idea is, I had in mind I will put on my tefillin once, then I take off my tefillin, and then I decide to put them back on again. I need to say a bracha because I only said that first bracha for this time of putting on tefillin. But if I have in mind initially that I'm going to be taking them off and putting them on again, then my initial bracha covered both times, and therefore I won't have to say a second bracha. Mishna Brura continues. The Mechaber said if they move out of place and then go back, you're going to have to say your bracha again. Katav Shlah, the Shnei Luchot HaBrit, one of the great halachic authorities and Kabbalists of the 1600-1700s said, Ha delo nehigi ha'idna levarech keshenishmetu bimkoman. Ha this, delo nehigi, that we do not have the custom. Ha'idna, now. In other words, nowadays. Nowadays, we do not have the custom to say new bracha when your tefillin move out of place. Why is that? Mishum, because the v'sha'at tefillah, at the time of davening, mistama einu masiach da'ato mehem. Mistama comes from the word stam. We can generally say, we can assume. Mistama eino mesiach da'ato. You do not remove your mind, your intention from them. And it is like you are taking them off on condition, almanat, on condition to put them back on again. The idea here, great principles in brachot that we are seeing, is that when I put on the tefillin, for example, with intention to that the bracha still applies, so then the bracha still lasts. But as soon as the bracha no longer kicks in, as soon as my mind has left the focus on the bracha, then a new bracha is necessary. So that's why, for example, we don't talk between washing for bread and making amotzi, because that initial bracha carries us through. So the same idea here, that if I'm wearing my tefillin during davening, even though I accidentally took them off by the tefillin moving out of place, nevertheless, I still have them in mind. And so when I put them back, that does not necessitate a new bracha. The pasuk ha'agah b'samuch ta'en lachzor levarech, that the Ramor, Hagah, the note, that's the Ramor, said samuch, close by, in other words, in a little while, that as long as you have in mind, you don't have to say a new bracha. So we view it when it falls off by mistake, when it moves by mistake, but I still have it in mind, so I don't need to say a new bracha. So here you see an example where the Shulchan Aruch says, if your tefillin move out of place, you don't say a new bracha. The Ramor, by not saying anything, agrees with that. However, the halacha is that you do not say a new bracha, because we don't follow that opinion. As the Shla says, we view it as if you have the whole thing in mind. But since the whole reason that you don't say the new bracha is because during davening you have it in mind the whole time, so if so, those who go sometimes ad chatzot, until midday with tefillin on, so people who wear tefillin for longer, and we'll discuss the propriety of that in the future, in mishmatu, if they do move out the way, so that's not just during davening, they're wearing them as they're going about their daily business, ra'ui levarech, it would indeed be appropriate to say a new bracha when you put them back in place. V'achayei Adam katav, the Chayei Adam, one of the great halachic authorities of the 1800s, wrote, Da'af b'shat ha'tfilah im nishmatu ha'mavarech lo hifsid. Even at the time of davening, if they move out of place, the one who says the bracha, lo hifsid, has not lost. In other words, you lose nothing by saying a new bracha. There's no problem in saying a new bracha. So you're allowed to follow the original ruling of the Shulchan Aruch. Umi kol makom. However, the Mishnah Brura himself concludes, nevertheless, nireh, it seems to me, delama'et, to diminish, to go with fewer brachot, adif is better. Don't look for reasons to make extra brachot. Every bracha is a usage of Hashem's name, And if we're not completely sure about it, rather not say the bracha. Mim komam, if the tefillin moves from its place. So how much from its place does it have to move? Davka kulan or ruban. Only if the tefillin, the entire tefillah moves out of place, or most of the tefillah moves out of place. Aval miktsatan, but if a little bit of it moves out of place, after tzarech lachzir al makoman, even though you're going to need to return it. In other words, it slid 10%, 20%. You need to put it back. Ein tzarech lachzor levarech. You do not need to return and say a new bracha. Tzarech levarech, you'll need to say a new bracha. Why? The kevan shehizizan mimkoman, since you moved them from place, have kamo shesiran legamre. When they are moved out of place, it is like they have been removed completely. Next one, shelo levarech. This is saying, it's the shelo levarech. This is the Ramah saying that actually when you take a tefillin off and you put them back on again, don't say a new bracha, and this is our custom. So the Mishnah Brura explains that. Shelo levarech, kevan dezizan al dat lachzor. Since you moved them with intention to put them back, masha'en kain benishmatu me'atzman, not so when they move by themselves. Amrina detechef shenishmat azda le hamitzvah. We say as soon as it has moved, azda gone, another Aramaic word, the mitzvah has gone. Right? You didn't have it in mind, again, as the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch. Ulachi shatak le harav mechaber, and therefore the Ramah was silent. He did not object to the ruling of the Shulchan Aruch over there. Why does the Ramah only say, we don't do this when it comes to intentionally removing tefillin? Because the Ramah agrees that when the tefillin came off by themselves, you didn't do that with intention. V'da'od, and understand further, it's the same law if you took them off completely with intention to move to put them back again. The second opinion, the some say, that's a way of saying the second opinion, still argue, even if you moved around in the meantime. So we have this argument, some say, as soon as you've taken off your tefillin, you need to put them back on again. Even if you intended it to put them back on immediately, you took them off, you need to put them back on. The other opinion says, no, if you took them off and you're going to put them right again, back on again, you don't need to say a new bracha. And that applies whether you stayed in the same place, whether you moved to different places. You have both opinions over here. Upaska achronim kain, and the later authorities ruled that if you take off the tefillin with intention to put them right back on, even if you move from one room to another, you do not say a new bracha. However, if your intention was not to return immediately, only after an amount of time, even if you changed your mind. So let's say I decided I need to go out and do something, I'll be back in 10 minutes, 20 minutes. I take my tefillin off and I say, you know what, I'll actually do it later. I put my tefillin back on immediately. Still, I'm now going to need to say new bracha. Or I had in mind to put them on immediately. Or I end up doing something for 10 minutes in between. The whole world, everyone agrees. We will need to go back and say a new bracha. So again, if I take off the tefillin and put them back on immediately, we have this argument whether I have to say a new bracha. We say we don't have to say a new bracha, even if I walk around a little bit, as long as it's immediate. However, if I take it off and only come back a lot later, or I take it off with intention to only come back a lot later, I will need to say a new bracha. Next halacha within this, so too if I took off my tefillin to go to the Beit HaKisei, the room of the chair, the lavatory. If I take off my tefillin to go to the lavatory, even if I have intention to put on these tefillin again immediately, I'll need to say bracha l'chule alma, according to the whole world, according to everyone. Why? Daha, because. Daha is Aramaic for because. Ein rashai leilech bahin leveit hakisei. You are not permitted. Rashai comes from the word rashut, permission. I do not have permission to go with tefillin to the toilet. Ve'idchile, and therefore they were pushed aside. As we see later on, I can't have tefillin inside, and so therefore the tefillin are, so to speak, forced out of my mind in a sense. The bracha is forced away from them, and I will need to say a new bracha. V'katav Chaya Adam, and the Chaya Adam wrote, Duadin keshecholet shetzarich lehafiach. It is the same when a person takes off his tefillin because he needs to break wind. Kevan de'asur lehafiach behen. Since it is forbidden to break wind with tefillin, and we'll see later on, this is one of the things we need to be most careful about with tefillin. Tzarich lachzor ulevarech. A person will need to go back and say a new bracha. So any time that you would take off tefillin because there's something you're not allowed to do with those tefillin, you would definitely have to say a new bracha when you put them on. So again, what did we cover today? Number one, how do you say the bracha, sitting or standing, or how do you put on tefillin, sitting or standing? There is this opinion that you put on the hand tefillin sitting and the head tefillin standing, or saying the bracha in the one and the other in the other. The conclusion is, for Ashkenazim, we do the whole thing standing up. What if you put on tefillin multiple times during the day? If there is a break between those times, you will definitely say a new bracha. If for some reason you are not allowed to take your tefillin with you in terms of whatever you're doing, you will definitely say a new bracha. If the tefillin fell off or moved out of place, the Shulchan Aruch says you say a new bracha. However, the later authorities say actually probably better not to say a new bracha if it was all during davening. If you take off your tefillin with intention to put them back on right away, again, the Rabbi Yosef Karo says you would say a new bracha. The Ramor says you don't say a new bracha, and we don't say a new bracha. And finally, if you have in mind that you'll be putting on your tefillin and taking them off and putting them on at the time that you say that bracha, again, then that would certainly be covered. Have a wonderful day.